Hello, and welcome back to Code Your English, the place where we learn English while we learn about life. Wherever you are listening from today, on a bus, in your kitchen, on a morning walk, or lying in bed before you fall asleep, thank you for choosing to spend this time with us. Every episode we record is a small gift we want to give you. Not just new words and new grammar, but new ways of thinking that can change how you see the world and how you see yourself. Today's topic is one that touches every single one of us, no matter how much English we already speak, no matter how experienced we are in our jobs, and no matter how many years we have lived. Before we tell you exactly what we are talking about, let us ask you a few questions, and we want you to really think about them, not just listen and move on. Have you ever believed, completely and confidently, that you were right about something, only to discover much later that you were wrong? Have you ever stopped listening to someone in the middle of a conversation because you thought, deep inside, that you already knew everything they were going to say? And have you ever looked back at an old version of yourself, maybe from a year ago or 5 years ago, and felt a little embarrassed at how sure you used to be about things you clearly did not fully understand? If any of these questions made you pause, even for a second, then this episode is exactly for you. We want to tell you something that might surprise you. Many of the most intelligent, talented, and capable people in the world eventually stop growing, not because they lack ability, but because somewhere along the way they started believing they already knew enough. This episode is not about how smart you are. It is not a test of your intelligence, your vocabulary, or your grammar. It is about something far more important than intelligence, and that is having an open mind. An open mind is available to anyone, whether you are a beginner in English or an advanced speaker, whether you are 20 years old or 70, whether you have a university degree or none at all. So we encourage you, gently but sincerely, to stay with us until the very end of this episode, because somewhere in the next few minutes, we believe you will discover a new way of thinking about yourself, about learning, and about English. Let's begin. What does thinking you already know everything really mean? Let's start by making sure we truly understand what we mean when we say someone thinks they already know everything. This phrase does not mean that a person literally believes they have all the knowledge in the universe. Nobody actually believes that, not even the smartest scientist or the wisest teacher. Instead, this phrase describes a certain attitude, a certain inner voice that quietly whispers things like, "I don't need any more advice," or "Nobody can really teach me anything new," or simply, "I already understand this, so there is no need to listen further." It is a mental habit more than a factual belief, and that is exactly what makes it so dangerous, because it can hide inside us without us even noticing it is there. What makes this even more interesting, and honestly a bit uncomfortable to admit, is that this attitude can appear in absolutely anyone. It does not care about your age, your education, or your profession. You might see it appear at school, when a student stops paying attention because they assume the lesson will be too easy for them. You might see it at work, when an experienced employee refuses new methods because the old way always worked fine. You might see it in friendships, when someone stops asking their friends for opinions because they believe their own judgment is always superior. You might even see it inside a family, when a parent or an older sibling refuses to consider a different perspective simply because of their position in the family. And of course, since this is a podcast about English, we must mention that this attitude often appears in language learning too. Someone studies English for a while, reaches what feels like a comfortable level, and then quietly decides, without even realizing it, that they have learned enough. Now here is something very important that we want to clarify clearly. There is a real and meaningful difference between having confidence and being closed-minded. Confidence is healthy. Confidence means you trust your abilities, you believe in your progress, and you feel secure enough to try new things without constant fear of failure. Closed-mindedness, however, is very different. It means refusing new information, refusing correction, and refusing to admit that there might be something you still do not know. Confidence says, I can handle this challenge. A closed mind says, there is no challenge left for me to face. So remember this simple but powerful idea as we continue through this episode. Confidence helps us grow, while a closed mind quietly stops that growth before we even notice it happening. Why do people think they know everything? Now that we understand what this mindset looks like, let's gently explore why it happens in the first place. Understanding the reasons behind a behavior is often the first step toward changing it. So let's look at this with curiosity rather than judgment. One of the most common reasons is simple pride. Pride convinces us that admitting we don't know something is a form of weakness, when in reality, it is quite the opposite. Closely connected to pride is ego, that inner sense of self-importance that wants to protect its own image at all costs, even if that means refusing to accept new information. Another powerful reason is fear, specifically the fear of being wrong. Many people were taught, sometimes without realizing it, that being wrong is shameful. So instead of risking that uncomfortable feeling, they simply avoid situations where they might discover they were mistaken. Past success can also quietly create this mindset. If someone succeeded once using a certain method or a certain way of thinking, they might assume that same method will always work forever, in every situation, which is rarely true in a world that keeps changing. Some people also want to look smart in front of others, and admitting uncertainty feels to them like admitting failure, so they pretend to already know rather than risk looking uninformed. Comparing ourselves to others plays a role too. When we constantly measure our knowledge against someone else's, we sometimes convince ourselves we must already be ahead, simply to protect our self-esteem. And finally, one of the simplest reasons of all is that people often just don't ask enough questions. Asking questions requires humility and curiosity, and when those two things fade, so does our natural desire to learn. Let's look at a few everyday examples so this becomes even clearer. Think of a student who never studies before an exam because they genuinely believe they already understand the material well enough, only to be surprised by their grade later. Think of someone driving in an unfamiliar city who refuses to ask for directions, wasting an hour driving in circles rather than simply asking a stranger for help. Think of a person in a conversation who interrupts others again and again, not because they are rude by nature, but because in their mind they already know what the other person is about to say. So listening feels unnecessary. What is truly fascinating and a little humbling is that most people who behave this way do not even realize they are doing it. It is rarely a conscious decision. It is a quiet habit that builds slowly over time, shaped by pride, fear, past success, and simple human nature. The hidden dangers of thinking you know everything. Now let's talk honestly about why this mindset becomes such a serious problem over time. At first glance, it might not seem harmful. After all, feeling confident and sure of yourself doesn't sound like a bad thing. But when that confidence turns into a closed door, several very real dangers begin to appear in someone's life, often without them noticing, until the damage is already done. The first danger is simple but powerful. You stop learning. Learning depends entirely on curiosity, and the moment curiosity disappears, learning quietly ends along with it. Every single day of our lives holds something new to teach us, whether it's a new fact, a new skill, or a new perspective. But if we walk through life assuming we already understand everything around us, we close the door on all of that potential growth without even realizing what we are missing. The second danger is that you begin making more mistakes, not fewer. This might sound strange at first, since we often assume that people who know everything must make fewer errors, but the opposite tends to be true. People who never ask questions often repeat the very same mistakes again and again, simply because they never received the information that could have helped them avoid those mistakes in the first place. They miss important details that a simple question could have revealed. The third danger is deeply social. People around you slowly stop giving you advice. Friends, mentors, teachers, and colleagues eventually notice when someone consistently ignores their suggestions. And rather than continuing to offer guidance that feels wasted, they quietly stop trying. This means you lose access to valuable outside perspectives exactly when you need them most, simply because people have learned that you never truly listen. The fourth danger touches our relationships and our work life directly. You become difficult to work with. Nobody genuinely enjoys collaborating with someone who constantly responds with, "I already know," to every suggestion or idea. Good teamwork depends on open communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to consider different viewpoints, and a closed mind slowly poisons all three of these things. The fifth and final danger we want to highlight today is perhaps the most heartbreaking. You begin missing real opportunities. New ideas, unexpected chances, and life-changing information most often arrive through listening, through conversations, and through moments when we are truly open to hearing something we did not already know. A closed mind, unfortunately, closes the door to exactly those moments, meaning that some of life's best opportunities quietly pass by without ever being noticed. Think about a job offer that might have appeared if someone had simply asked a thoughtful question during a networking event, or a helpful piece of advice that might have saved months of wasted effort, if only someone had paused long enough to truly listen. Think about a friendship or a business partnership that never formed, simply because one person was too busy proving they already understood everything to notice the value standing right in front of them. These 5 dangers rarely appear alone. In real life, they tend to build on one another, slowly and quietly, like small stones piling up to form a wall. A person stops learning, which leads to more mistakes, which leads to fewer people offering guidance, which leads to strained relationships, which finally leads to missed opportunities. And because this process happens gradually, over months and years rather than overnight, it becomes very easy for someone to reach a point of frustration or disappointment in life without ever understanding exactly why. This is precisely why recognizing this pattern early in ourselves and sometimes gently in people we care about is so important. The English learning example. Since this is a podcast dedicated to helping you improve your English, let's bring this entire conversation directly into the world of language learning, because this is where many of you may recognize yourselves the most clearly. Imagine a person who has been studying English for some time, and one day says, quite confidently, "My English is already good enough." At first, this sentence doesn't sound dangerous at all. In fact, it sounds like a reasonable, even healthy statement of confidence. But let's watch closely what tends to happen next. This person slowly stops reading in English. They stop listening to English podcasts, English videos, and English conversations. They stop actively practicing speaking, since they feel there is no more need to push themselves. They stop learning new vocabulary, assuming their current vocabulary is already sufficient for whatever they need. And little by little, they stop putting real effort into growth, because in their mind, growth has already been achieved. Now imagine several months pass. What happens to this person's English during that time? Very often, instead of staying at the same level, their skills quietly begin to weaken. Vocabulary that isn't used starts to fade from memory. Listening comprehension, which depends on consistent exposure, slowly becomes less sharp. Speaking fluency, which requires regular practice, becomes a little more hesitant and less natural. Meanwhile, let's imagine a completely different learner, someone who continues believing there is always more to learn, no matter their current level. This person keeps reading a little every day. They keep listening to new content, even when it feels challenging. They keep having conversations in English, even when they make mistakes along the way. They keep adding small amounts of new vocabulary to their memory, day after day. When we compare these two learners after the same amount of time has passed, the difference becomes strikingly clear. The person who assumed they already knew enough often finds their skills have quietly declined, while the person who kept learning continues moving steadily forward, sometimes without even realizing how much progress they have made, because the growth happened gradually, day by day. This example beautifully illustrates something we deeply believe here at Code Your English. Fluency is not a destination you arrive at and then stop moving. Fluency comes from continuous, ongoing learning, a little bit added every single day, for as long as you choose to keep growing. Signs that you might be acting like you know everything. Now, let's turn this conversation inward for a moment and invite you to do something a little uncomfortable, but incredibly valuable. Honest self-reflection. Nobody enjoys admitting they might have a closed-minded habit, but recognizing these signs in ourselves is genuinely the very first step toward positive change. So, as we go through this list, try to listen with an open heart rather than judging yourself too harshly. One common sign is that you interrupt people often during conversations, jumping in before they finish their thought because part of you already assumes you know exactly what they are going to say. Another sign is that you rarely ask questions, whether in class, at work, or in daily life, because deep down you feel that asking questions might make you look less capable or less experienced, than you want to appear. A third sign is disliking feedback, feeling a small wave of discomfort or defensiveness whenever someone offers you constructive criticism, even when that feedback is offered kindly and with good intentions. Related to this is a fourth sign, becoming defensive quickly, responding to disagreement not with curiosity, but with immediate justification, explanation, or even irritation. A fifth sign involves how you view your own mistakes, specifically believing that making a mistake is embarrassing or shameful, rather than seeing it as a completely normal and valuable part of learning and growing. A sixth sign is only truly listening to people who already agree with you, quietly dismissing or ignoring the opinions of anyone who challenges your existing beliefs or assumptions. And finally, a seventh sign is believing, somewhere deep inside, that your opinion is almost always correct, and that other people's differing opinions are simply mistakes waiting to be corrected. If you recognized yourself in one or two of these signs while listening, please don't feel discouraged. Almost every person on this planet, including all of us creating this podcast, has experienced some of these tendencies at different points in life. The real goal here isn't to feel guilty. The real goal is awareness, because noticing these habits within ourselves is truly the very first and most important step toward gently changing them. Why curious people keep growing. After spending time discussing the dangers of a closed mind, let's shift our attention toward something far more hopeful and inspiring: the incredible power of curiosity. Curiosity is, in many ways, the exact opposite of thinking you already know everything, and it is one of the most valuable qualities any human being can nurture throughout their entire life. Curious people share several beautiful habits that consistently help them grow. They ask questions freely, without feeling embarrassed or worried about how those questions might make them appear to others. They genuinely enjoy the process of learning itself, rather than seeing learning as a boring task they must complete. They are willing and even happy to admit when they don't know something, understanding that this admission is a sign of honesty, not weakness. They listen carefully to others, giving people their full attention instead of simply waiting for their own turn to speak. And they actively explore different ideas and perspectives, even ones that challenge their existing beliefs, because they understand that exposure to different viewpoints is one of the richest sources of personal growth available to us. But why exactly does curiosity make life so much more exciting? Think about it this way. A curious mind sees the entire world as an endless classroom full of fascinating lessons waiting to be discovered in ordinary, everyday moments. A closed mind, on the other hand, sees the world as something already fully explained, leaving very little room for wonder, surprise, or discovery. If you look closely at successful people throughout history, whether they are scientists, teachers, entrepreneurs, or great leaders, you will almost always find deep curiosity sitting quietly at the center of their achievements. Scientists remain curious about how the universe works, constantly asking new questions even after decades of research. Teachers remain curious about how to reach their students more effectively, always searching for better ways to explain difficult ideas. Great leaders remain curious about the people they lead, genuinely listening to different perspectives before making important decisions. In fact, when we study people who continue learning and achieving throughout their entire lives, one quality almost always appears in nearly every single one of them: They simply refuse to stop being curious, no matter how much success or experience they had already gathered along the way. The difference between knowledge and wisdom. Let's now explore an idea that many people never fully consider, yet it holds one of the most important lessons in this entire episode: the true difference between knowledge and wisdom. These two words are often used as if they mean the same thing, but they are actually quite different from one another. Knowledge refers to learning facts and collecting information. It means knowing dates, definitions, rules, vocabulary, and details. Knowledge is absolutely valuable, and we should never dismiss its importance. But knowledge alone is not enough to live a truly successful or fulfilling life. Wisdom is something deeper and more meaningful. Wisdom means knowing how to actually use knowledge in real, practical situations. It means understanding people, their feelings, and their perspectives, not just understanding facts and figures. Wisdom also means staying humble, even after gaining significant experience or expertise in a particular area. Here is something beautifully paradoxical about wisdom. It often begins with the simple, humble phrase, "I don't know." This might sound surprising at first, but think about it carefully. A person who confidently claims to know everything has, in many ways, stopped their own journey toward wisdom, because wisdom requires an ongoing openness to new understanding. Meanwhile, a person who honestly admits, "I don't know, but I would like to learn," opens the door to deeper insight, better decisions, and more meaningful growth. This is precisely why humble people, generally speaking, tend to become wiser as time passes. Their humility keeps them constantly open to new lessons, new perspectives, and new corrections, allowing wisdom to build steadily throughout their lives, layer upon layer, year after year. So the next time you feel a strong urge to say, "I already know," pause for just a moment and consider saying, "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to learn," instead. That small shift in language reflects an enormous shift in mindset, one that can quietly transform the entire direction of your personal growth. Simple daily habits to stay open-minded. Understanding these ideas is valuable, but understanding alone won't change our daily habits unless we take deliberate, practical action. So let's talk about some simple, realistic habits you can begin practicing starting today. Habits that will gently help you stay open-minded, curious, and continuously growing. The first habit is to ask one new question every single day, about anything at all, whether it relates to English, your work, or simply the world around you. The second habit is learning to listen without interrupting, giving the person speaking to you your complete attention until they have fully finished their thought. The third habit involves reading something different from your usual choices, exposing yourself regularly to new topics, new writing styles, and new perspectives you wouldn't normally encounter. The fourth habit is learning to accept corrections gracefully, viewing them as helpful gifts rather than personal criticisms meant to hurt you. The fifth habit is remaining open to learning from both younger and older people around you, recognizing that valuable wisdom and insight can come from absolutely any age group, not just from those with more years of experience. The sixth habit is admitting your mistakes quickly and honestly, rather than defending them out of pride or embarrassment. The seventh habit, quite simply, is choosing to stay curious, actively searching for interesting details in ordinary, everyday moments rather than assuming you already understand everything around you. And of course, since you are listening to an English learning podcast, the eighth habit we want to highlight is continuing to learn English every single day, even after you feel you have already reached a comfortable level of fluency. Finally, here is one small but remarkably powerful habit that can transform your conversations. Try replacing the phrase, "I know," with the phrase, "Tell me more." This tiny shift in language invites deeper conversation, shows genuine respect toward the other person, and keeps your mind consistently open to new information, rather than closing the conversation the moment you assume you already understand what is being said. None of these habits require special talent, expensive tools, or a huge amount of extra time. They simply require a small, honest decision, made again and again, day after day, to stay a little more open than you were the day before. And here is something encouraging to remember. You don't need to practice all 9 of these habits perfectly starting tomorrow morning. Real, lasting change almost always begins with just one small habit, practiced consistently, until it becomes a natural part of who you are. Perhaps you choose to start this week simply by listening without interrupting, or by asking one honest question you have been quietly avoiding. Whichever habit you choose first, the important thing is simply to begin, because small, consistent actions, repeated over time, are exactly what quietly transform a closed mind into an open one. A short story with a powerful lesson. Let us close this part of our discussion with a simple story that beautifully captures everything we have talked about today. Imagine 2 friends, both beginning their English learning journey together at exactly the same level. Let's call them Friend 1 and Friend 2. After a few months of dedicated study, both friends reach a similar level of comfort and confidence in English. At this point, however, their paths quietly begin to diverge. Friend 1 starts believing, "I already know enough English now." Slowly, without even fully realizing it, Friend 1 stops reading regularly, stops actively listening to new content, and stops practicing conversations as often as before. Friend 2, on the other hand, adopts a very different mindset, quietly telling themselves, "I can always improve a little more." Friend 2 continues reading a bit every single day, continues listening to new podcasts and videos, and continues practicing conversations, even when those conversations feel a little uncomfortable or challenging at times. Now, let's imagine an entire year passes for both friends. When we compare their progress at the end of that year, the difference becomes remarkably clear. Friend 1, who assumed their English was already good enough, finds that their skills have stayed roughly the same, or in some areas have even quietly weakened due to lack of consistent practice. Friend 2, however, has continued growing steadily throughout the entire year, speaking more naturally, understanding more vocabulary, and feeling significantly more confident during real conversations. What makes this story so powerful is realizing that the difference between these 2 friends wasn't natural talent, intelligence, or opportunity. The real difference was simply their mindset, and the small, consistent daily actions that mindset created over time. This little story teaches us something clear and unforgettable. The student who keeps learning, even in small daily amounts, will always move further forward than the student who assumes they have already arrived at their destination. Final reflection. The best learners never stop learning. As we begin moving toward the end of today's episode, let's take a quiet moment to bring together everything we have explored throughout this conversation. First, and most importantly, remember this simple truth. Nobody knows everything, no matter how experienced, educated, or accomplished they may become throughout their lifetime. Every single person we encounter in our daily lives, no matter their age, background, or profession, has the ability to teach us something valuable, if only we remain humble and open enough to notice it. We also discussed how mistakes, rather than being something shameful to hide from others, actually serve as some of our most powerful and effective teachers throughout our entire lives. We explored how genuine questions, asked with real curiosity, gradually create the deep wisdom that simple facts alone can never fully provide. And perhaps most importantly of all, we discovered together that learning truly never has to end. Not at graduation, not after reaching a certain level of English fluency, and not even after achieving significant success in our careers or personal lives. So, as you go about the rest of your day today, we would like to leave you with one simple, powerful question to carry with you. What can I learn today that I didn't know yesterday? This single question, when asked sincerely and consistently, has the remarkable power to keep your mind open, your curiosity alive, and your personal growth continuing steadily for the rest of your life. And that brings us to the end of today's episode here on Code Your English. Thank you so much, truly, for spending this time with us today, choosing to invest your valuable time and attention into improving your listening skills, your vocabulary, and your understanding of the English language. Please remember that every single episode we create together is helping you grow, not just in English, but in how you think, how you listen, and how you approach the world around you. As you continue your own personal journey, whether in learning English or in life more broadly, we sincerely encourage you to stay curious, to keep practicing consistently, and to never assume that you have already learned enough. Before we say goodbye for today, we want to leave you with two simple sentences we hope you will carry with you throughout your week. The first is this: the moment we believe we know everything is the moment we stop growing. And the second is this: a curious mind will always travel further than a proud mind. Thank you again for listening, and we genuinely mean this, from our hearts to yours. Every question you ask, every mistake you allow yourself to make, and every small moment of listening instead of assuming is quietly building the kind of open, curious mind that will carry you further than you might ever expect, both in English and in life. Take care of yourself. Stay curious. Keep practicing your English every single day. And we truly look forward to welcoming you back for our next episode here on Code Your English. Until then, goodbye and keep growing.